Okay guys, I have another video for OctopathTraveler 2, but before I begin, I want to give another short disclaimer. In my past couple of videos, I left this mic. Funny story, it was right here the entire time, and I just had no idea, so that's kind of funny, but I got my mic, and I like holding it because I feel like that I can edit the quality of it better this way. Like, it sounds more clear for obvious reasons. It's like an inch away from my face. Which means I have to move away when I laugh and stuff. Yeah, so I want to get like one of those arms that holds a mic and get that. It'll be a while before I do that, and then I also eventually want to get a nicer camera too, because this is just the crappy built-in webcam that's currently on my laptop. And the laptop itself is kind of on life support at the moment too. If you guys could see this, it's kind of miserable. Anyways, that's completely unrelated. I just wanted to say that I found my mic. The other disclaimer is, see, we're already a minute into the video. I have a really bad habit, if you've seen any of my other videos before, I have a really bad habit of making videos all too terribly long. So I'm going to try my hardest to keep this under 10, 12, 15 minutes, right? Like, I recorded another version of this video and it was a half hour long. So I like the longer video essay type stuff, but this isn't a video essay video, this is just me talking. So I want to talk Octopath Traveler 2, specifically about the post game. I want to talk about the final chapter, and I want to talk about one of the post game side quests. So in order for me to talk about that, obviously this video is going to contain spoilers. If somehow you thought this would be spoiler free, you were wrong. So if you don't want to be spoiled, then click away from this video, give me a like and subscribe, and come back later after you beat the game, because you need to play Octopath Traveler both 1 and 2. Not for this video, just you know, to be a decent human being, you need to play both games. Yeah, so spoiler warning. We're just going to be talking about the end game in a little bit here. So let's start about the final chapter. And what do I mean about final chapter for Octopath Traveler 2? I'm talking about the whole V-Day thing, where you meet Arcanet. That's kind of like the start of it. Or no. The start of it is, I guess, technically when they're all out camping and the night falls. And then you go and you meet Arcanet. So I'm talking about that chapter, that quest, where you start doing that, and then when you beat V-Day. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, after playing Octopath Traveler 2, and getting all the lore stuff and whatever, and then playing through the chapter, I've got to admit that it was a little hard to keep up with. At least for me it was. Like, I could understand, okay, this person wrote that journal, but this journal seems to be written from a different perspective. Like, is this past, present, future? Is this a different character entirely? Why is this character's name getting changed? Why is this character getting a name all of a sudden? There is a lot of moving parts in the post game for Octopath Traveler 2 and for like the main villain group. And if you're not paying attention, it can be pretty easy to get lost. So at the end of my Octopath Traveler 2 review video, I talked about the post game a good bit and what I thought about it. And while I think that it's clever and it's cool that all the characters or that, you know, all the characters that you've interacted with all, you know, are a part of some like villainous organization and whatever, that's cool. It's kind of like repeating a little bit of the first game in that sense, though, which isn't a bad thing. Like, I'm glad that the stories connect. They kind of need to. But it does feel a little lazy in Octopath Traveler 2. In Octopath Traveler 1, for context, so spoilers for that game as well, the whole post-game was connected through characters that either had some sort of connection or relationship to Galdera, which is the true final boss, or to Graham, which is a character whose blood is needed to summon Galdera. Like, one of the best connections that comes to mind is just Graham's life. And so you have Graham, who heals Alphen as a child. He's got some like rare disease, and Graham heals him, which is really cool. And that's what inspires Alphen to be an apothecary. Graham writes about these types of things in his journeys and his travels in a notebook, or a journal, And that's the journal that Tressa ends up getting at the beginning of her chapter 1 in the first game. And you never read it, which is like a little weird. Like, why do you have this journal and you're not like actively reading it? Like, so much of the game's post-game content is in that journal. But anyways, and then you have Haunted, whose final boss is a like dark, demonic, twisted Graham, who's been corrupted by a satanic ritual that was gonna, turn him into the vessel for the evil demon god Galdera. And when he tried to escape, the effects of the ritual were still affecting him, and then he turned into the beast Red Eye. So that's a really cool connection that's between Alphen, Tressa, and Haunted, and it's not something that you really get to see at first glance, and it's really clever. And then you have Therions. Let's see, Therion and Ulbrich, both of their stories kind of relate to the Gate of Hornburg, or the Gate of Finis that's within Hornburg. The little stones that you have to find with Therion open the gate, and then Hornburg with Ulbrich is obviously where the gate is. Cyrus looks for the tome from the far reaches of hell, which has the incantation to summon Galdera. Ophelia's is about a cult group that's also trying to summon Galdera. And then Primrose doesn't necessarily... Primrose is probably the least connected, which is ironic, considering Octopath Traveler 2 as well. But her story in and of itself is pretty dramatic, and it's got its own stuff going on. Like, she does have connections with the Black Crows group and everything, but it's more like 1 second removed or whatever. But yeah, so Octopath Traveler 1 was pretty clever with the way that it connected everything to the post game, and Octopath Traveler 2 is a little odd. So for context, Octopath Traveler 2, there's this group called the Moonshade Order, and it's primarily filled with individuals that no longer see the point in hoping for a new dawn or a new tomorrow. Basically saying that there's no reason for hope. Things are always going to be dark, things are always going to be bad. It's just nihilism is basically all it is. And so there's a couple characters both inside the Moonshade Order and those who are just acquainted with the Moonshade Order, but who are in each and every single character's stories. And those characters all connect to the Moonshade Order, and then they connect to the big bad guy. So, yeah, you have Arcanet, who's kind of the leader of the Moonshade Order. She is Mint in Timonos' chapter. She has basically like 5 recruits, if you want to call them that, within the Moonshade Order. And so, kind of in order, looking at my list here, you have Caldina. Caldina is the final boss in Timonos' story and the leader of the Sanctum Knights. She's kind of forgettable in the grand scheme of things, just because there's so many other moving pieces in context of the post-game. You can kind of forget about her, because Arcanet's more important. Then you have Ori, who's the Scrivener from Partitio's story. Then you have Orboro, who is the character known as Kazan in Hikari's story. Then you have Tansy, who is probably the most forgettable NPC character. She's the playwright character from the Traveling Troupe, or Troupe, whatever the word is, from Agnia's story. And then you have Petrichor, and Petrichor is one of those characters where you blink twice and you miss it. Petrichor is just the name of the Dark Hunter. That's it. The other 3 notable characters that are related to the Moonshade Order would be Claude. So Claude is Throne's biological father. When he was in the womb of his mom, he was embedded with the blood of Vide. And he's also just a natural descendant of the sorcerer Darkest, who's like incredibly powerful. So this explains why he's eternally young. I wouldn't say he's immortal, because obviously he dies. But he just has his youthfulness is eternal. Is kind of what it seems to be. So yeah, Claude. Then you have Harvey, who murders and kidnaps Oswald's wife and daughter, and then he frames Oswald for it. And then you have Trousseau, and Trousseau is also kind of pretty irrelevant to the overall gameplay or to the overall lore. Trousseau was just a character that was converted and influenced by Claude. And so that's why Trousseau thinks that he should kill everyone, because there's no hope for tomorrow. It's just life is sucky, so why not kill everyone, right? So that's Trousseau. So we're 10 minutes in the video, and I'm still giving us the preamble. Yeah, so I I pointed out at the end of the Octopath Traveler 2 review video that if you drop Caldina, you have 8 characters, 8 villains, and you have 1 villain per hero. You have Oboro, you have Claude, you have Tansy, you have Ori, then you have Petrichor, then you have, who's the A? Arcanet, then you have Trousseau, and then you have Harvey. So they all spell Octopath, just in backwards order of the actual travelers, if you start with Oswald, which is kind of cool. So yeah, but all this to say that as I was confused when I finished Octopath Traveler 2. I was like, okay, who are these characters? Why are their names getting changed? What's going on here? So I just gave you like a very summarized, detailed version about it, but as I was looking for answers online, I found a bunch of people who kind of felt similarly to me. And not only that, but also people who voiced some criticisms about how these characters were handled, especially like Petrichor and Tansy and so on. So yeah, so that's all preamble, thematic stuff. Let's talk about like the actual events of the game. Starting with Claude and Arcanet. Actually, no, I don't think we need to go over that. You guys should know how the post-game stuff works, as far as like who does what and everything. If not, then you can watch my review video or look up somebody's lore rundown, because I'm not gonna waste time on it. Yeah, so as I was saying, yeah, Discord servers, Reddit threads, YouTube videos, a bunch of people were kind of saying, you know, some of this seems shoehorned and so on. Half of the villains get name changes, the other half are just kind of thrown in last second. It kind of comes off as if the developers just needed to tie the story together somehow, and they just made random characters or like random name changes just to fit like a naming motif, and then the character's on screen for 2 seconds and then dies, or you never fight them, and then the stuff happens within in the background. It's pretty loose. I mean, like, yeah, I was really confused when reading the journals. I had to kind of get like a second, third party to help me decipher them and so on. There's too many moving pieces in the post game of Octopath Traveler 2. There's too many characters, too many of them are shoehorned at the last minute with the name changes and everything. And which is kind of disappointing when you look at, say, like Octopath Traveler 1, with every character either relates to Galdera or to Graham. And there's a pretty linear, consistent way on how that happens. And, you know, you don't meet Graham, you meet Kid. And then you kind of do his side quest, and he's looking for his father or whatever. And then once you do the game, then you get access to Graham's journal. You get Alphen's backstory, where you see Graham, and then you find out that Graham is Red Eye. So it's like he's in and out of the narrative, which is really, really cool. Whereas here it's just like, bam, here's 5 new characters. 3 of them are new, and the other 2 got name changes. You're just like, what? Yeah, so I gotta be honest, Octopath Traveler 2's it's not the content of the lore that's in the post game. It's how the content is given to you. It's all at once with the journal entries, and it's all in the singular chapters of like, ooh, Oboro is actually Kazan and Arcanet is Mint. There's not a whole lot of I don't think like evidence to kind of support the idea. Like, I saw some people who were saying, oh, I knew Kazan was evil from the beginning, and it's like, really? Like, I don't know how you caught that. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't that way, but yeah, it just kind of felt like that the post-game lore, I compared it to a freshman student who stays up really, really late, the last night that a 16-page paper is possibly due, and they're trying to write this paper on, I don't know, like Jane Austen's significant works or whatever, without ever reading a Jane Austen book. Like, that's kind of, it just felt shoehorned, and it's just like, boom, I have to find some way of putting Sense and Sensibility in this book. Or, yeah, and it's just like, what? Like, why? Why not take a little more time and, I don't know, either read it or, like, develop it? But yeah, so I can understand people saying that it kind of feels a little rushed or whatever, especially in context of the fact of, like, I don't think you battle half of the Moonshade Order characters. You don't battle Kazan, you don't battle Petrichor, you don't battle Tansy. Who else am I missing? You battle Claude. Oh, and you don't battle Ori. Everyone else you fight, though. But you do them as, like, late game bosses, like Harvey, Trousseau, Claude. These are all the final bosses of most of your travelers. Caldina, but she doesn't count. You fight Arcanet, but you fight her in the post game. Like, I think it would have been cool having to fight Ori, Aboro, Tansy, Petrichor, and then refighting Trousseau, Claude, and Harvey. Like, what if they survived? You know, like, what if they didn't actually die from their main character stories, and you had to do a boss rush at the end or something? Kind of like what you did in Octopath Traveler 1. You had to refight all of the end-game villains, which I thought was really, really cool. Not to say that they should have done that specifically, but just for the members of the Moonshade Order, I think that would have been great. I think that they should have done that. Make them more, like, evil or more of, like, a threat. Because I don't know about any of you guys, but when I beat Arcanet, I was like, okay, is that it? Like, she's supposed to be the leader, and she's the first one I fought, and I kind of smoked her. Like, I don't know. Maybe it was just me. So, but yeah, so that's stuff about V-Day. 16 minutes. YOLO. Sorry, guys. Let's talk about the true post-game super boss for Octopath Traveler 2. It's not V-Day, surprisingly. Galdera, which is kind of cool. So Galdera is back, which is a little weird. So we're going to talk about the lore implications of Galdera being here. Yeah, so there's two reigning theories, because once you beat Galdera, you meet Alfred Hornburg, who is the king of Hornburg during Ulbricht's story in the first Octopath Traveler game. Now, he dies 8 years prior to the actual events of the game, but you get like a flashback cutscene with Ulbricht and him with his king before Alfred dies. So yeah, you meet Alfred Hornburg at the end of Octopath Traveler 2, but he's 30 years old. Whereas in Octopath Traveler 1, he's like 70, 80 or whatever. He's not like on his deathbed, but he's an old king. And there's no way to tell how old he is. Like, you can't inquire or scrutinize him in Octopath Traveler 1 because he dies before the events of the game. So you can't take Alphen or Cyrus to him because he's just dead. And to my knowledge, there's no way of knowing how old he is. Like, I don't think there's a book in Octo 1 that tells you. But so the reigning theory is that Octopath Traveler 2 is in some way, shape, or form, and that's what we're going to discuss, is a prequel to Octopath Traveler 1. So there's two theories as to how Octopath Traveler 2 is a prequel. So the first theory is the more, I think, complicated one. The first theory is parallel worlds, or like multiverse. And this is to say that they don't happen in the same world. There's some things that kind of don't line up, or there's oddities, rather, especially when you consider the games like mythos. So for example, you have two continents. You have Celestia in Octopath Traveler 2, and you have Orstera in Octopath Traveler 1. So in Orstera, you have 8 gods, which are all like the warrior god, the dancer, the hunter, the merchant. They are your character class, and they're gods, right? So you have the same thing in Octopath Traveler 2. In Octopath Traveler 1, then you have Galdera, who is absent in the mythos from Octopath Traveler 2. Okay? Galdera has seemingly been replaced with V-Day. So, okay, so then you have 9 gods. Well, in Octopath Traveler 1, then you have 4 post-game mini-bosses, or they're not mini-bosses, they're just regular bosses, that are all also gods with their own classes, like the Rune Seeker, Rune Lord, I forget the name, the Archmage, the War Master, I think is what it's called, and then I forget the last one, but yeah, so you have 4 more gods. So in Octopath Traveler 1, there's a total of 13 gods, with Galdera being an evil one. In Octopath Traveler 2, there's 8 gods, and then you have V-Day as the 9th evil one. So there seems to be a difference in the theology and mythos of both continents, which is a little odd. You know, like, why, if they were happening in the same world, why wouldn't they both share the same mythos? like even in real world theology and stuff, like, or religions, when you have the same religion in and of itself, like in the US or Spain or Japan or whatever, a lot of the core elements kind of have to stay the same. Like if you look at Christianity, for example, any branch of Christianity will affirm that Jesus is the divine Son of God, for example. You're not going to find a branch of Christianity that doesn't affirm that, because A, they're either a heretic, or B, they're just not Christian in the first place, right? So, yeah, it's like you'll get some like differences and everything in world religions, which is great, and that's just how world religions work. But for the mythos itself to be different, I think is kind of striking. So that's the main reason as to why some people are saying it's parallel worlds, because the mythos is different. There's a couple other things, but that's the biggest one is different mythos. Another reason could be the technological differences between Octopath Traveler 2 and 1 just seem so wide. Like, if Octopath Traveler 2 is a prequel, and it has steam engines, and it's got gramophones, then why aren't those technological advances present in Octopath Traveler 1, if it's a prequel, right? So, yeah. That's another theory as to why it could be parallel worlds. So let's talk about theory 2, which I think is a bit simpler, and it's the theory that I personally favor. So I think that Octopath Traveler 2 is in fact a true prequel to Octopath Traveler 1. And I say this to mean, like, there is a definitive amount of time, some duration, between Octopath Traveler 2 and Octopath Traveler 1, and they happen on the same consistent, coherent timeline. It's not multiverse, it's not parallel worlds. It's one world. You have Orstera, which is a continent somewhere else, and you have Cilicia, which is another continent somewhere else. So what I think is that I think they're about 40-50 years apart, given given Alfred Hornburg's age. Probably close to 55 years on average, given the fact that you have the 8-year time skip from when Hornburg dies and falls to the events of Octo 1. So I'd probably say somewhere on average 53, 55 years difference. And as far as people saying, oh, well, you know, how is what about like the technological differences? I would just say that even by Octo 1, if Octo 1 is definitely a sequel in some capacity, but let's just assume that it's all in the same world. 40 to 50 years, given the technology, even in Octo 2, isn't enough for world communication and for world travel to be mass-produced, and for just the common layperson to be traveling around. Now, you'll have some NPCs between both Octo 1 and Octo 2 that are like, oh yeah, I'm from a faraway land, and then they don't tell you where they're from. Now, most of the time, if you're like out and about, or you're at school, or you're at work, and you meet someone who's from a different country, they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm from Spain, or I'm from Portugal, or I'm from Brazil, or I'm from England, or whatever, or I'm from Europe. Anyways. They'll tell you, because like they assume you know what they're talking about. Like, oh yeah, I'm from this country. But if global communication and global travel isn't a thing, but you're from a new place, then what reason is there to tell someone about it? Like, obviously, part of the reason could be like you just wanting to get it out there, be like, oh yeah, I'm from this country, you know, we're not really well known or so on. Like, yeah, I guess that could be the case, but practically speaking too, if you go to a new continent and I mean, like, and you're just like, yeah, I'm not from here, people are going to be like, oh, where are you from? You could just be like, well, you're not, like, I could tell you, but you don't know the name of it anyways, like, because this isn't normal, you know, like people going from one continent to another. So that's one reason that I think they could be the same, just because Alfred Hornburg's age, and I don't think the technological differences is a point against the same cohesive timeline. I think it's a point for. And then you have some like weird things too. So you have like the mobile game, Champions of the Continent, which acts as a prequel to Octo 1. Well, Champions of the Continent has a side story within the game itself that is unrelated to the plot within the game itself, called Side Cilicia. And this acts as a prequel to Octo 2, and you know that because Pyro is still alive in Throne's chapters and stuff. So, you have, in timeline-wise, it seems like you have Side Celestia, then you have Octo 2, and then you have like a 40-year time jump, and then you have Champions of the Continent, and then you have Octo 1. So, personally, that's what I think is kind of going on there. Yeah, so I don't think the technological differences is like a huge thing, because like there's this history fact that I always love bringing up, is technically in real life human history there is a 22, 23, 24 year period in the mid 1800s where a samurai could have faxed Abraham Lincoln, which is the weirdest thing to think of, just because in your mind you can read all of like anthropological world history. You can read all about it. It's just weird to contextualize all those years and different time periods for all these different continents and countries. In your mind, it's just like, oh yeah, during the time of the Industrial Revolution, this was also going on, you know, like next door in the other country, and you just don't think about those things. So yeah, I don't think the tech stuff, I don't think is a point against timeline. As far as the theology stuff is concerned, what I also think there too is just like, yeah, I feel like it's just those gods are probably, they're just inhabiting Orstera, which is a little weird to think about if they're gods. But I mean, like, you know, demigods and stuff work too. I've also heard some people say that there can only be one Gate of Finis because LeBlanc in Octo 1 seems to be primarily concerned with the one in Hornburg. Because, like, if there was another Gate of Finis, then why wouldn't she just go to another one? But I also think, like, again, LeBlanc isn't immortal, and she's also not all-knowing. So I think it's just she didn't know about the one in Celestia. I think is what it comes down to. So, anyways, I'm gonna close this video before it gets to another half hour long. I was close, guys. I was 10 minutes over. I was close. But I did want to end this video by saying that because of this presumable gap between Octo 2 and Octo 1, whether it's like 40 years or whether it's multiverse stuff, whatever's going on, whatever the gap is, because we seem to have a missing link, and it seems to revolve around Alfred Hornburg and his search from the far reaches of hell. I think if we get a third game, it's got to be about that gap. It's got to connect the two together. It's got to tell us what Alfred Hornburg was doing and what his plan is. And I think that would be really cool. I think maybe even him being one of the warrior classes that you play as would be insane. Like, think of that. That's so cool. Yeah, I mentioned the mobile game, and I'm going to say that if we do get an explanation as far as, like, what Alfred is doing or how the games connect, that lore information should not be made in the mobile game. I mean, it's SquareEnix, right? When was the last time that they took a really popular franchise and dumped a lot of important lore into a mobile game? Like, who would do that, right? Like, that's kind of stupid. Especially a gacha game. Yeah, I couldn't imagine them doing that. I'm so glad SquareEnix is a competent company. Anyways, so yeah, let me know what you guys think about Octopath Traveler 2 and the post-game and stuff down in the comments below. This video did not only last 15 minutes. I tried. I even scripted this, and I stuck to the script pretty well. Maybe it was just, maybe it was a canon event. I think that's what it was. It was just meant to be a 30-minute long video, and now I'm going to hold on for the next minute because we're at 28 minutes and 50 seconds. So, I don't know. Maybe I'll just wait for the 30-minute marker. No, I won't. Anyways, guys, this is Jake logging out. Thanks for watching. Talk to you all later.